Before anyone knew her name, before detectives opened the garage door on Jaguar Drive, before Sore became the center of one of New Mexico's most disturbing homicide cases, there was a single sentence that shattered everything. My son just told me his girlfriend killed someone. The voice on the 911 line trembles, frantic, almost breaking. The mother doesn't know exactly what her son saw. She doesn't know how bad it is. All she knows is that he ran from a detached garage behind his girlfriend's home, pale and shaking, muttering something about blood, something about a sword, something about a girl on the floor. A dispatcher tries to calm her, asks her to repeat what happened. The mother inhales, steadying her voice just enough to say the words she wishes she could take back. He said she cut someone's head. He said she did it with a sword. Within seconds, Santa Fe police units are racing toward a quiet residential street on the city's south side. Officers don't know if the killer is still inside. They don't know if there are multiple victims. They don't even know who made the call, only that it came from a terrified parent relaying what her son told her. Minutes later, 5 officers gather outside a beige home on the 5900 block of Jaguar Drive. The property looks ordinary. The house sits at the front. A standalone garage sits behind it. Wind chimes move lazily in the breeze. There is nothing here, not a single sign, that suggests a brutal killing has taken place inside. But the truth is waiting for them behind a door that only partially works, in a room where 3 young adults slept together the night before, and where only 2 of them woke up. As officers approach the main house, they meet 44-year-old Tara McCulley, who has no idea why police are here. She has no idea her home is now a crime scene. She has no idea that her daughter, 19-year-old Kiara McCulley, is the prime suspect in a homicide so violent it will make national news. Inside, Tara is confused and irritated. She thinks officers are here for a misunderstanding or a disturbance. She wants to know why they're walking through her home. She wants to know why they're raising their voices. She has no idea there is a body just yards away. While one team checks the house, another circles toward the back. The garage door is damaged and won't open. They force their way in. Silence. Then a smell. Then a shape on the floor. This is where officers find 21-year-old Grace Jennings, lying on her back, covered in deep slash wounds. Her throat has been cut so severely detectives later describe it as an attempt to decapitate her. Her skin bears the marks of struggle, puncture wounds, defensive wounds, and long, sharp cuts across her legs and torso. But what stops officers cold is not just the brutality. It's the setting. A bed sits just feet away. Blankets are rumpled, personal items scattered. This isn't a storage space or a guest room. This is where Kiara lived. This is where Kiara and Isaac slept. This is where Grace stayed the night with them, sleeping side by side with a woman who would kill her the next morning. And next to Grace's body, lying on a dresser, is the weapon, a metal sword approximately 3 feet long, covered in blood. Back in the main house, Kiara stands near her mother, calm and talkative. She tells officers that Grace wasn't allowed there, that her boyfriend Isaac invited her without permission, that she was pissed off. She does not ask what happened in the garage. She does not ask if anyone is hurt. She shows no shock, no panic, no confusion. She only shows annoyance. When officers finally break the news to Tara, when they tell her the real reason they're inside her home, her reaction is stunned disbelief. What do you mean there's a body in my garage? Her home, her daughter, a dead girl she didn't even know was inside. And it gets worse. As officers secure the scene, a woman arrives at the front of the house, breathless, trembling, desperate. It is Grace's mother. She knows her daughter was last seen at this address. She knows police are here, but she doesn't know why. She asks the only question that matters. Is my daughter okay? Detectives can't answer her. Not yet. Not in this moment. Not with a chaotic crime scene unfolding behind them. They tell her she must come to the station. She doesn't know her daughter is already gone. She doesn't know her daughter's body is inside the garage only a few yards away. Across town, officers locate 22-year-old Isaac Apodaca, Kiara's boyfriend. He is pacing outside a tech store, rambling through shock. He tells officers he walked into the garage and saw Kiara killing Grace. He says she smiled. He says she told him, "I just did it." He says he panicked, ran outside, and called his mother because he didn't know what else to do. He claims he had no part in the killing. But that is a lie he will only be able to maintain for a few more hours. When detectives take him in and secure his phone, they will uncover messages, dozens of them, that show Isaac was not a horrified witness. He was a participant in the planning. He encouraged the killing. He told Kiara she would move up the ranks if she murdered Grace. He talked about the black market, perks she would earn. He discussed cleanup plans. He talked about waiting until Grace fell asleep. But none of that is known yet. Right now, the only visible truth is a dead woman on the floor of a garage, a sword beside her, a mother in the driveway collapsing into disbelief, a young man shaking as detectives cuff him, and a young woman, 19 years old, sitting silently in the back of a police car, watching everything unfold like she is finally done pretending. For officers, this is only the beginning. The crime scene will tell part of the story. The autopsy will tell another. But the most damning evidence is digital. The messages between Kiara and Isaac, messages that investigators will soon read for the first time. Those messages will expose a plot, a motive, a disturbing shared delusion, and a months-long build-up to the morning where Grace Jennings walked into a garage and never walked out. Tonight, Kiara and Isaac sit in separate interrogation rooms. Neither knows what the other is saying. Neither knows how much investigators already suspect. Neither knows how much evidence is about to surface. But both know one thing. They killed the same girl. One with her hands. One with his words. And the truth is finally coming for both of them. The Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office is not designed for drama. The walls are plain. The chairs are functional. And the interrogation rooms are little more than concrete boxes with microphones. Yet on October 29th, 2022, these rooms became the stage for two of the most unsettling interviews detectives in Santa Fe had faced in years. Inside them sat the only two people who truly knew why Grace Jennings was lying dead on a garage floor, covered in sword wounds, Isaac Apodaca and Kiara McCulley. They were separated by only a hallway, but their stories could not have been more different. Detective Javier Vigil chose to begin with Isaac. On the surface, Isaac appeared fragile. Hands shaking, eyes unfocused, voice breaking as if the horror of the morning had traumatized him beyond comprehension. He spoke quickly, as if afraid of the silence that followed each of his statements. His version of events was emotional, detailed, and at first glance, disarmingly human. He explained that the night before the murder, he, Kiara, and Grace had all slept in the same bed inside the cramped garage apartment behind Kiara's mother's home. This detail alone unsettled investigators. The emotional tension between the three was already clear, and now they knew all of them had been inches apart the night before Grace died. Isaac said he awoke to Kiara growing agitated that Grace was there. He claimed Kiara told them both to leave. He said he tried to gather his things, but went into the main house to use the bathroom. When he returned, he claimed he encountered a nightmare. Kiara standing over Grace, blood on her hands, the sword nearby. According to him, Kiara looked at him and said words he would repeat again and again. I just did it. He insisted he panicked. He said he couldn't breathe. He said past trauma paralyzed him. Instead of calling 911, he dialed his mother. His explanation was disjointed but persistent. He was too overwhelmed to think clearly. That was why he didn't call for help. That was why he ran. That was why he left Grace's body on the floor. Detective Vigil listened. But Isaac didn't realize that everything he was saying carried a silent weight behind it. His timing didn't add up. His fear didn't align with his actions. And the discomfort in his voice seemed to increase the moment Vigil asked him about the timeline. Isaac claimed everything happened around 11:47 a.m., but the call to 911 didn't come in until 1:44 p.m., nearly 2 hours unaccounted for. When Vigil gently asked what Isaac was doing during that time, the young man began to unravel. He said he was hyperventilating outside. He said he sat on the side of the garage trying to collect himself. He said he didn't know how to process what he had seen. The story was possible, but it was hollow. There was no urgency, no mention of trying to help Grace, no sign that he even checked whether she was alive. Vigil didn't confront him. He just let him talk. Sometimes a detective gains more by listening than challenging. Across the hall, another detective met with Kiara. Her demeanor was the opposite of Isaac's. She wasn't crying. She wasn't shaking. She wasn't distraught. She sat calmly, as if she had been waiting for this conversation. Before she was asked a single question, she offered a chilling observation. "I believe it's because someone was found dead in my room." She said it softly, without emotion, as if she were discussing a lost object instead of a murdered human being. When asked what she remembered, she said her memories were foggy. She mentioned missing time. She said she believed she had dissociative identity disorder, though she admitted she had never been professionally diagnosed. She described invented personalities, Abby, Jinx, Jess, and attributed emotional reactions and behaviors to them. But she showed no symptoms of someone dissociating. Her speech was clear. Her thoughts were organized. She never slipped into a different voice or identity. If anything, she appeared mentally present, perhaps too present for someone claiming psychological fragmentation. One statement, however, could not be misinterpreted. "Part of me hopes she's dead." There was no remorse in her eyes when she said it, only irritation. Irritation that Grace had come over, irritation that Isaac had invited her without permission, irritation that Grace's presence had sparked an argument. And then Kiara revealed another piece of the puzzle. She had dreamed about killing Grace before. She described violent fantasies. She spoke about knives, anger, and death in a tone that suggested these weren't stray, intrusive thoughts, but rehearsed mental images she had revisited more than once. But the most important detail came when she said Isaac pressured her. She said he told her she would move up in ranks if she killed Grace, that she would gain status, perks, and approval. She said he talked about a vigilante organization he called Ghost, a secretive group that supposedly got rid of bad people. This secret society narrative was bizarre, but the terminology matched exactly what officers would soon discover on Isaac's phone. Detectives now had 2 interviews, 2 stories, and a third witness silently waiting to testify. Isaac's phone. Detective Vigil re-entered Isaac's interrogation room after a short break. In his hands was a standard consent form and Isaac's own phone, seized during his detention. Vigil told him, politely, that investigators would need to examine the device because they believed it might contain evidence. Isaac agreed immediately. He signed the form. He handed over the phone. He didn't ask what they were looking for. He didn't ask what they suspected. He didn't ask for a lawyer. And that mistake would end his future. When the phone unlocked and messages opened, Vigil saw exactly what Kiara had described. Dozens of messages from Isaac to Kiara that made the truth unmistakable. "Stab her. I wish you would stop hesitating. She is your first. You'll move up in the ranks. Perks in the black market. I'll help you clean up the mess. Wait until she falls asleep. Just do it." Every line contradicted Isaac's story. These weren't the words of someone blindsided by murder. They were the words of someone orchestrating it. When Vigil began reading the messages aloud, Isaac's shaky composure disintegrated. He started claiming Kiara had sent the messages to herself. Then he claimed he had a second phone. Then he claimed some messages were about video games. Then he insisted he didn't understand what he was talking about at the time. None of his explanations could survive the timestamps, the phrasing, the planning, or the callousness. Eventually, cornered by his own words, Isaac conceded one devastating truth. He knew Kiara planned to kill Grace. He said the plan had existed since 2020. He admitted he encouraged her. He admitted he didn't stop her. He admitted he didn't warn Grace. He admitted he stood by and let the killing happen. He denied physically attacking Grace, but that denial mattered little compared to his digital fingerprints on the motive, the preparation, and the coaching. By the end of the night, the 2 halves of the story were complete. Kiara had wielded the sword. Isaac had wielded the influence. Both had wanted Grace gone. Both had acted on that desire. Both had turned a cramped garage into a tomb. Vigil left the building knowing he had everything he needed. Grace's autopsy would confirm the violence she endured. The crime scene would confirm the weapon. But the messages on Isaac's phone revealed something deeper than physical evidence could capture: intent. Grace died not because of a sudden argument or a moment of uncontrolled rage, but because 2 people who once claimed to love her built a delusion together. One where killing her was a solution, and now Both of them sat in separate rooms, no longer partners, no longer united, unable to save each other from the truth. By the time detectives finished their first round of interviews, the truth was no longer a mystery. It was a timeline waiting to be reconstructed. A timeline that began long before October 29th, 2022. A timeline shaped by jealousy, manipulation, delusion, and a young woman caught in the center of two people who had convinced themselves she didn't deserve to exist. To understand why Grace Jennings died, investigators had to trace everything backward, not to the day of the killing, but to the relationships that pulled Grace into the orbit of the two people who would ultimately take her life, Kiara McCulley and Isaac Apodaca. Grace had once dated both of them, first Isaac when she was 16 and he was 20, then Kiara later on. Each relationship ended badly, leaving behind emotional chaos neither Kiara nor Isaac handled well. Jealousy, resentment, obsession, and unhealed wounds lingered long after the breakups. But more importantly, something darker began growing beneath it all, the belief that Grace represented a threat rather than a person. Kiara, in particular, developed fixation on Grace, one shaped by anger from their breakup, accusations of betrayal, and past trauma Kiara attributed to Grace's orbit. She believed Grace had been present during a sexual assault she endured in 2020. While police confirmed Kiara did report an assault that year, they found no evidence Grace played the role Kiara described. It was a story that seemed to have evolved in Kiara's mind over time, growing sharper and more distorted, until Grace became a symbol of everything that had hurt her. Isaac reacted differently. After his short-lived relationship with Grace ended, he moved in with Kiara, but what should have been a new beginning deteriorated into a toxic partnership where both fed each other's worst impulses. And as messages on Isaac's phone revealed, the two spent years constructing a violent fantasy together, one where killing Grace would be a righteous act. For detectives, the most chilling discovery came not from confessions, but from digital archives. The messages showed unmistakable planning, talk of ranks, first kills, perks, and black market favors, as if they believed violence awarded status. They wrote about swords, daggers, and methods. They wrote about waiting until Grace was asleep. They wrote about the mess they might need to clean up. Messages over months, sometimes years, suggested a slow descent into shared delusion. And so, when Grace needed a place to stay on the night of October 28, 2022, she turned to people who once loved her, unaware that she was stepping into the one place she should have feared. Kiara wasn't expecting Grace that night. She wasn't asked for permission. Isaac invited Grace on his own. He told detectives Grace had nowhere to go. He thought letting her spend the night would help squash old tension. But investigators now knew he had a different motive, the opportunity he and Kiara had been discussing for years. Grace walked into the garage believing she was staying with friends. Kiara saw her arrival as an insult, a trigger, the final breach in boundaries Isaac had already disrespected by inviting Grace without her permission. The three slept in the same bed, Grace falling asleep beside the woman she once dated, and the arm's-length reach of the man she once broke up with. Grace didn't know Isaac was messaging Kiara under the blankets. She didn't know he was encouraging her murder only a few feet away. She didn't know her presence was fueling a dangerous, collective delusion. She fell asleep next to two people who had already decided she should die. Investigators later retraced the morning through digital timestamps, interviews, and forensic findings. Sometime between 8 a.m. and late morning, Kiara's anger boiled over. She claimed she blacked out. But the physical evidence told a clearer story. A prolonged assault with a sword, multiple stab wounds, deep slicing wounds, a neck wound so severe detectives immediately recognized it as an attempted decapitation. Grace never had a chance. The brutality of the attack indicated she was caught off guard, likely asleep or waking up in confusion. Defensive wounds on her arms suggested she tried to protect herself only in the final moments. The room around her showed signs of struggle, but nothing could match the savagery detectives found along her neck and torso. It was not one strike. It was many, and it didn't end quickly. After the killing, Kiara did not flee. She didn't call 911. She didn't check on Grace. Instead, she stood calmly when Isaac walked back inside. Isaac told detectives. She smiled at him. She told him she just did it. Detectives believe him, Not because Isaac was trustworthy, but because the scene matched the story. No attempt was made to save Grace's life. No attempt to call for help. No panic. No remorse. When Kiara walked into the main house and sat next to her mother, officers captured her demeanor on body-worn cameras. Irritated, inconvenienced, confused why police were inside, but not disturbed by the violence just behind her. When Tara was told a body was in her garage, her reaction was what Kiara's never became: shock, disbelief, heartbreak. She had been in the main house the entire time. She had no idea her daughter was capable of what she had done. She had no idea Isaac had been urging Kiara to kill Grace. She had no idea the garage her daughter lived in had become a war zone. During their interviews, Kiara and Isaac tried to shift blame in subtle and not-so-subtle ways. Kiara pointed to her mental health. Isaac pointed to trauma and panic. Kiara suggested Isaac planted ideas in her head. Isaac claimed Kiara manipulated him. Kiara said she lost time. Isaac said he didn't understand what was happening. But the digital timeline cut through every excuse. Their messages were time-stamped. Their conversations were preserved. Their intentions were explicit. One message from Isaac read, "Just do it." Another, "You'll move up in the ranks." Another, "Perks in the black market." And one of the darkest, "She is your first." These weren't panic messages. They weren't accidental. They weren't misunderstandings. They were directions. Kiara used the sword. Isaac supplied the motive. Both shared the delusion. Both created the opportunity. Both trapped the same girl in a garage. Grace likely woke to the blade, already striking her. Detectives built the case piece by piece. The messages, the autopsy, the interviews, the timeline. The evidence painted a picture not of a spontaneous outburst, but coordinated killing rooted in resentment and fantasy. Grace had battled mental health challenges of her own. She had been vulnerable. She had been in and out of unstable environments. She had reached out to people she once cared about because she believed they were safe. That trust was a final betrayal. The most tragic part of the timeline wasn't the brutality of the attack. It was the simplicity of how preventable it had been. Grace's mother later told detectives she had no idea her daughter was walking into danger. She believed Kiara and Isaac were normal, if troubled, teens. She believed her daughter would be safe for the night. She believed she'd see her again. Instead, detectives had to do what no parent should ever experience. Gently, slowly, carefully tell a mother her daughter was gone, and how. Grace never woke up again after that night on Jaguar Drive. But the truth behind her death was only beginning to unfold. The days following Grace Jennings' murder exposed a truth more unsettling than the violence itself. The sword, the wounds, the blood, those were tangible horrors. But what detectives uncovered afterward revealed a deeper rot. Two young adults who had been walking toward this outcome for years, each feeding the other's delusions, each convinced that Grace's life was something they could take. With Kiara McCulley and Isaac Apodaca in custody, the criminal process began with the question that would shape the case. Were they capable of standing trial, or would one of them try to escape accountability through a claim of insanity? Kiara tried first. From the moment she sat inside the interrogation room, she leaned on the same story: missing time, alternate personalities, foggy memory, a sense that someone else inside her body had taken control. She named imaginary alters, described fantasy-like inner worlds, and claimed she suffered from dissociative identity disorder. But real does not present itself only when convenient. It does not activate on command. And it does not appear fully formed during a murder investigation by someone who had never previously documented symptoms, never sought treatment, and never mentioned it to family. Psychiatric professionals quickly recognized what police already suspected. Kiara's story did not match clinical reality. Her presentation was inconsistent, her narrative superficial, and copied from pop culture portrayals of mental illness. Yet the justice system requires caution. To ensure her rights were protected, the court ruled she was temporarily incompetent and sent her to the New Mexico Behavioral Health Institute for observation. 1 month later, the conclusion was clear. Kiara was competent. She understood the nature of her actions. She understood the legal process. She was not psychotic, dissociated, or detached from reality. Her attempt to paint herself as mentally unstable collapsed under clinical scrutiny. She returned to jail to face murder charges. While her sanity claim dissolved, investigators focused on the most powerful evidence they possessed: the messages on Isaac's phone. The digital footprints revealed an unbroken line of intent stretching across months, even years. Isaac wrote about ranks, first kills, perks in the black market. He told Kiara to just do it. He referred to Grace as your first. He talked about cleaning up the mess. None of it was ambiguous. None of it could be explained away. It was a blueprint for murder. Those messages reshaped the prosecution's strategy. They no longer saw Kiara as the sole actor, but as the weapon wielded by a pair. Isaac provided motive, context, encouragement, and pressure. Kiara executed the plan. Together, they created an environment that lured Grace to her death. The case appeared straightforward. 2 defendants, 1 murder, overwhelming evidence pointing to conspiracy. But in the legal world, the simplest answers rarely play out without complication. As hearings progressed and discovery unfolded, Kiara and Isaac's fates began to diverge sharply. The turning point arrived in early 2025. Kiara agreed to plead guilty to second-degree murder and testify against Isaac. This was not mercy. It was strategy. Prosecutors needed her testimony to seal the case against Isaac. And in return, Kiara secured a deal that capped her exposure but still allowed the state to argue for a sentence of up to 30 years, twice the normal maximum for second-degree murder, given the extraordinary brutality of the attack. For Grace's family, the plea was painful but understandable. A guaranteed conviction for Kiara meant avoiding the possibility of an insanity defense derailing the trial. A cooperating witness meant Isaac's involvement would finally be laid bare in court. The alternative, a risky jury trial with competing narratives and psychiatric claims, could have dragged on for years. With the plea, Kiara admitted what she did and placed the weight of her testimony against a man who helped her plan it. Isaac's legal path took the opposite direction. After initially reaching a plea agreement in late 2024, he abruptly fired his attorneys, voided the deal, and pleaded not guilty. This decision pushed his trial into further delays, but it also isolated him. With Kiara now prepared to testify and the digital messages already in the hands of prosecutors, Isaac faced a drastically weakened position. His new legal team inherited a case where their client had admitted knowing Kiara planned a killing as far back as 2020, had encouraged her through message after message, and had left the crime scene while Grace lay dead. He now faced the full weight of a first-degree murder charge, a potential life sentence, and a co-defendant willing to testify against him. Prosecutors assembled their narrative. This was not a spontaneous killing born from jealousy or chaos. It was a culmination of a shared obsession with violence. Kiara and Isaac had built an elaborate fantasy world, complete with imaginary organizations, imaginary ranks, and imaginary rewards, where killing Grace was portrayed as advancement. They encouraged each other, fed each other's resentment, and turned Grace into the target of an invented ideology. Grace had been vulnerable, struggling, and looking for help the night she went to that garage. She sought shelter. She found a trap. The evidence made clear that she never woke to warning signs, never saw the blade coming, never imagined the 2 people who were once part of her life would decide she didn't deserve hers. In the aftermath, her killers did not break down or plead for help. There was no remorse. Kiara walked calmly into her mother's house. Isaac left the scene. Neither called 911. Neither lifted a hand to save her. Now they waited in separate cells, each facing decades behind bars. Kiara's sentence would come first, shaped by her plea. Isaac's trial loomed after, with every message ready to be shown, every detail preserved, and every lie dismantled by the evidence he himself created. Grace's family, meanwhile, was left with only the truth. Their daughter died believing she was among people who cared about her, her trust used as a final weapon against her. Regardless of courtroom outcomes, nothing would ever undo what happened on Jaguar Drive. Kiara would one day leave prison. Isaac might never walk free again. But Grace's life, her future, her voice, her hope, was taken permanently. The justice system could sentence her killers. It could not restore what they destroyed. Long after the garage was sealed, after the sword was logged into evidence, After the body was taken from the cold floor where she died, the story of Grace Jennings continued in courtrooms, conference rooms, jail cells, and grieving homes. Justice moves slowly, and for families like hers, that slow grind can feel like an ache that never stops spreading. Grace's mother, who had rushed the crime scene unaware her daughter was already gone, now found herself in a different kind of nightmare. One measured in hearings, legal updates, motions, and delays. When the police withheld confirmation that day, she had clung to a small strand of hope. She didn't understand why they wanted her to come to the station. She didn't understand why they couldn't say whether Grace was alive. She didn't know that officers were struggling to find a gentle way to tell her there was no hope left. Her daughter was already dead in the garage behind that house, already bleeding, already gone. As weeks turned into months, the details of Grace's final moments became known to her family in agonizing fragments. The sword, the wounds, the attempt to separate her head from her body, the slashes across her limbs, the signs she had tried to protect herself in a desperate, hopeless struggle, the stillness in which she was found, the way Kiara had stood nearby and smiled when Isaac walked in after killing, the messages that showed Isaac had been encouraging the murder instead of preventing it. It was cruelty layered upon cruelty. It was betrayal disguised as intimacy. It was a kind of violence that no mother is built to process, much less accept. Kiara was charged. Isaac was charged. But charges are not closure. They are not answers. They are not healing. What followed was a legal journey shaped by shifting alliances and unraveling lies. Kiara, once convinced she could manipulate her way out of responsibility, eventually pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, a concession that ensured she could still spend decades behind bars. The brutality of her act, the autopsy's findings, and the lack of remorse cemented the prosecution's demand for a sentence far beyond the usual limit for second-degree murder. The agreement allowed prosecutors to request up to 30 years, acknowledging that the violence inflicted on Grace warranted far more than the standard penalty. Most importantly, Kiara agreed to testify truthfully against Isaac. It was a betrayal that mirrored their crime. She had once claimed she loved him. She had once claimed they were unified by trauma, bound by their hatred of Grace. But faced with the weight of a possible life sentence and the impossibility of mounting an insanity defense, she traded their alliance for a chance at mercy. Isaac now stood alone. His decision to back out of his earlier plea agreement only worsened his situation. By firing his lawyers and pleading not guilty, he reset the clock. He bought time, but at a devastating cost. With every week that passed, investigators built a stronger case. Prosecutors refined their arguments. Grace's family remained determined to see both killers held accountable. And worst of all for him, Kiara turned from co-defendant to star witness. Her testimony wouldn't be pleasant. It wouldn't be emotional. It wouldn't show remorse. But it would be precise. And it would be backed by the messages Isaac had typed, word for word, as Grace lay sleeping in the same room. Every instruction, every encouragement, every reference to killing, every promise of perks and ranks, every piece of language that revealed this wasn't a moment of chaos, but a conspiracy they nurtured for years. What made the case uniquely horrifying wasn't just the savagery of the attack, but the psychology underlying it. This wasn't a crime fueled by passion or self-defense. It wasn't a sudden eruption of rage. It was something darker and far more chilling. Kiara and Isaac had built a fantasy around murder. They invented a secret group called Ghost. They imagined themselves as vigilantes. They convinced each other that killing Grace was justified. They treated violence as a game, a ladder, a way to earn status. Grace wasn't a person to them in those messages. She was a target, a first kill, a stepping stone to something they believed was bigger than themselves. The cruelty was not only in the act, but in the belief that her life could be reduced to a milestone. As the case moved forward, the prosecution emphasized this distinction. Grace had mental health struggles. She had instability in her life. She had friends in difficult situations. But she was human. She was vulnerable. She was seeking shelter and understanding the night she walked into that garage. She trusted people whose intentions were already poisoned. She stayed in the one place she should have run from. The morning she woke up, or perhaps barely woke at all, was her last. While the legal system prepared for trial, Grace's family faced a reality that their child, their daughter, their sister, had been killed in a room filled with people she once loved. There was no comfort in the evidence. There was no comfort in the explanations. Every detail made it worse. Grace's death revealed a chain of failures. Interpersonal, emotional, psychological, that converge in the worst possible way. Kiara had been violent, jealous, and unstable for years. Isaac had a documented history of domestic violence against Kiara, including a charge just one day before the murder. The toxic cycle they lived in was visible but unaddressed. Grace walked into their chaos unaware that a decade of neglect, avoidance, and unspoken violence would explode the one night she needed a safe place to sleep. Now, Kiara sits in the Santa Fe County Jail awaiting sentencing. She will likely remain in prison into her 40s or 50s. Isaac waits for his trial, delayed, complex, looming. If convicted, he could spend the rest of his life behind bars. His messages, his encouragement, and his knowledge of the plan since 2020 make the prosecution's case formidable. But for all the legal momentum, all the indictments, all the courtroom strategy, none of it can restore a single moment of Grace's stolen life. She never got to grow older. She never got to rebuild. She never got to feel safe again. Her story ended on a mattress in a cluttered garage, surrounded by two people who once cared for her but ultimately destroyed her. The justice system can convict. It can punish. It can isolate. But it cannot repair the wound left behind. For Grace's mother, each hearing is a reminder that her daughter is gone. Each delay is another month without closure. Each plea is a compromise she must accept, not because it heals, but because it is the only justice available to her. What happened inside that garage was more than a murder. It was a final collapse of two damaged people who mistook violence for purpose and fantasy for power, a delusion that cost an innocent young woman her life. Kiara and Isaac will live behind locked doors for decades. Grace will remain 21 forever, and her family will carry the truth of that garage for the rest of their lives. Because the final tragedy of this case is not that two young adults may grow old in prison. It is that one young woman never will.